I'm about to gush about something that I was just talking about in the live stream with people about Whitney. There are not many people who can stand. And it's like, wow. You know what I mean?
Take me for what I am.
Heads up, warning. She's personally one of my favorite singers.
My life.
Going into this unvoiced fricative consonant, shh. It's just like, we'll skip the jargon. She goes, shh, and then that breath, that exhale into some space in between the folds. People want to, falsetto or whatever. It's just, the folds look like this. There's some adduction, there's some space, and you can hear that because there's that airy hiss. You hear it?
My life.
And then she's so good at this with the words. More so than so many singers. Like, I have to be careful because I don't want my bias to be something that drags other singers. I don't want my joy of her, I don't want to lessen my joy of other singers just to elevate Whitney. I think that's a problem that a lot of people have with their favorite singers. They're like, no, this person's better. Don't celebrate your singer by making other singers worse in your mind. The crazy fact that it's hard for us to comprehend is that there's actually just that much talent in the world. And some of these artists speak to you personally, and that's okay and that's beautiful, but don't drag other singers. So I'm going to try to be careful about this. The way that she uses words and gives detail to the words is really stellar.
Share my life.
Share my life, right? I think those are words. And the way that she uses the operative words, notice how she gets off on my. When you punch pronouns, you sound like a jerk. Share my life, right?
Share my life.
She gets off of my and then talks about life. She was so good at understanding the different words.
Take me for what I am.
Take and am.
I am. 'Cause I'll never change.
Never, right?
'Cause I'll never change.
And the way that she blends it with I'll never. The two words are interconnected, and that's poetic. I'll never. It's legato there.
'Cause I'll never change.
And then she gives change, consonants, without punching them. I think a lot of people hear when someone like Whitney, or even like Gerard Way, or pick your rock and roll singer, they'll hear that people are landing really hard on the consonants, and what they'll do in response to that is they'll blow a lot of air on those moments. You don't need to. When you sing, you can hit consonants really hard without using a lot of air. The articulators and air pressure only, they don't directly correlate, whereas phonation does. So you have to use a lot of consistent air, very little of it, and then use your articulators when you really want to bring emphasis to something. And it sounds like you're punching and you're big and emotional, but the technique is still pristine. And what's important here is that singing is not about your emotions. It's about communicating and making a connection. So when you have the power of language and you use that, it is powerful in a way that coming on stage, getting on your knees and blubbering cannot be, unless you can keep those two the same. Because you have to communicate. That's what the art is for.
All my colors for you.
Listen to the venom of you.
As it take my love.
Same phrasing here with take Mala, right? She goes airy on the take.
My love.
She also does something that's really great. Like there's a lot about Whitney's lusciousness, I think, that we all love is actually a matter of technique. In these lows, when she gets lush, she's actually drooping her soft palate. Now, the difference between when she does it and someone like Beyonce does it is that Whitney will sustain it, whereas with like when Beyonce does it, she it's like she gets intimate and personal, whereas Whitney uses it to emphasize a point. So it's really interesting to me how they do this. They literally physically the same thing is happening, but artistically they're using it very differently. So listen to the soft palate droop.
As it change,
Up,
I'll never ask for too much.
it was drooped that whole time, and it gives this roundness. So it's if it's up, it's I'll never take, right, versus I'll never, right. One is a lot more sensual.
Just all that you are
She lifts it on R.
and everything that you do.
The other thing too that gives her that lusciousness is her lips are very, very relaxed, and her posture could not be more immaculate. What do I mean by posture? I don't mean like I'm going to take my shoulder blades and I'm going to put them down in my back and I'm going to do this because I read it in the book. Posture is active. Ideally, optimally, our muscles adjust just enough and let the skeleton take most of the responsibility for the structure of our body. Makes sense, right? Unfortunately, the human body, almost no one has perfect posture, right? And, I have an anterior pelvic tilt, so my butt hangs out, right? And there's all these like little imperfections in people's posture. And it's the hardest thing to teach in singing, particularly if someone's just like wired or like super headstrong or just like doesn't get enough sleep. It's the hardest thing to teach, but it's a really big reason why Whitney has that tone. Of course, I mean, some of this is just her voice, but like there is big parts of this that are part of her technique. And it's that combination of her voice with this technique that gives Whitney this sort of like, wow, lush sound.
That you do. You.
And she's also, so when she's in her low in some of these, she's putting a lot of air behind it, which will give a lot more like
All that you are.
Like all that you are, and you see on R she goes back. But the reason why I'm pointing this out is that one of the things that's really if you're getting strictly classical training, what'll happen is you'll be taught an even scale. And one of the things that people teach in order to achieve that is don't put a lot of air in your lows, because if you have to go up, you will not be able to. And that is true. What if the phrase doesn't have to go up? That does happen, right? And we see that here.
Just all that you are, that you do.
You hear the difference in, I guess, what people call vocal weight. I despise the term. How thick are the vocal folds? Let's call it what it is. My personal pet peeve.
That you do.
So let's go with this idea of vocal weight for a second. The thickness of the folds, the more there's, so the reason why your folds come together is some of it has to do with certainly, the arytenoids and, the things that happen in the larynx. But there's also something else. It's called the Bernoulli effect. If you take two pieces of paper and you blow between them, it creates a vacuum. There's a difference in air pressure, right? By pushing the air out, you actually create this vacuum that brings the paper together. Nature abhors vacuum, right? So when we sing, when we use air, There are other things that happen in response to too much air, but one of those things is that there's the thickness of the folds, which will give a stronger sound. But there's all sorts of things you can do. So let's break it down here.
Just all that you are.
Thick into this sort of breathy lightness. So if you're in a lower range, you can have some thickness, but also not have total adduction. This is adducted vocal fold, right? They're just like, they're together. And this is what a lot of people want to think is good singing, is like just entire vocal closure, or whatever jargon. They come together, right? But you can make them come apart. And this is what she is doing here. She's having these thick folds, and then she's letting some of it blow open.
All that you are.
And you know that that's the case because you can hear the sizzle and that hissy air. And before anyone types, it's a VHS, please tell me you can hear the difference between this.
Just all that you are.
You can hear the H, like the equivalent of an H.
That you do.
And then the other thing that's really great about her, she's doing all this stuff over a period of time. Nothing in the voice is an on-off switch. We are actually having a discussion during the live stream about what is falsetto versus head voice. Falsetto, for some people, it's the vocal folds are completely open, and it's the edges of the folds that are oscillating, creating the pitch. When does it become head voice? That's totally subjective. Head voice versus falsetto, I would say like pure falsetto is there's no vocal closure at all. It's just the edges of the fold vibrating open. But once you start getting closure, you have this difference of like falsetto versus head voice. It's really, they kind of like, they're not good terms. It's a blend. You can have a little falsetto. You can have a little opening. And the folds don't have to be completely together all the time, and that's fine. They can be completely open too, and she'll use that too. But what I'm sorry, the reason it's important to understand this range of motion is because it's everywhere in Whitney's singing.
And everything that you do.
Over the course of this phrases, she is lightening up.
And everything that you do.
So by the time she gets to do, it's very light. She hasn't changed registers. She's not in a dramatically different musical place, pitch-wise. But she will be. With a lot of like thick folds and a lot of vocal closure and a lot of breath, you can't do this. To do a run that quickly, your folds need to be thin so that they can move quickly. To go that high, generally you want them thinner, especially if you're not going to use a tilt. She just a little bit of thyroid tilt. And so from here,
all my colors for you.
And then she lightens up by the time she has to over the course of a couple phrases.
Very much further.
Then she goes back to it. This is one of the reasons why Whitney is incredible. As a musician, it's bonkers.
I don't really need to look.
Her decisions are so strong. Like, zero hesitance, absolute conviction. When she makes a decision, there's no hesitance at all. And she's making a lot of decisions because she's always perfect with her words and how she approaches it from a technical and emotional point of view. And yes, I do have chills. And if you don't have a heart. Joke. Kind of.
I don't really need to look very much further.
So this we have the droop soft palate again. Lowered larynx.
I don't wanna have to go
Pursed lips.
where you don't follow. I won't hold it back again.
She's she's very close to the microphone, which will boost the lower frequencies. So that in combination with the pursed lips. It's called the proximity effect. I talk about it a lot. You'll hear it. Check it out. Right? And before any Dunning-Kruger comes in and comments on that, go do a Google search. I don't have time for you. Oh, I know I'm stopping right before the sweet spot, but this is so good. This is what I'm talking, like basically her pacing, the way that she grows, like her timing over the course of the song is so good. Like hold it back again. The way that she's on time with the consonants, the way she's using the consonants to give emphasis, where she was doing like breathy and she was doing strong to breathy and doing all these things and runs, and then she goes right into this. Very much further. Pursed lips, droop palate, really up close to the microphone. The breath is still good. The breath is still gentle, but she's using consonants to make her point. Myself, there's nowhere to hide. Let's sing the vowels here. Hide. She's doing hide. Why? Depending on your voice, there are certain parts of your range where you lose a lot of power and things will sound strident. So there's something for tenors. This would be called the passaggio in classical singing. It would be like this. I'll demonstrate it. Oh my God! I'll demonstrate it very, very, very bright and obnoxious first, and then I'll do what Whitney's doing, and you'll hear the difference immediately. That part of my range is just like, what are you doing, right? It sounds unpleasant. This is what she's doing. Right? Like the tone is just, it's mind-boggling. This happens in certain parts of different singers' range. Like voice type is kind of a guide to that, but it will be specific to you, and you have to know where this happens in your voice. And so she doesn't do hide. She's hide because she wants power, because we all know what comes next. It's very, very, very deceptive when you listen to someone like Whitney, because I think what we all feel when we hear this is like, don't let me close, like, and we imagine just like this, all this like passion and energy, and let me just put all this air behind it. It's not what she's doing. Much to my chagrin, I would love to just like and feel all the feelings and just to do that and have it work, but it doesn't. You can't. The breath is not changing here. She's not using more. It's actually incredibly consistent. A lot of younger singers, they get handed the lip trill and they do it and it helps, but then they don't keep using it and they don't understand the point of it. It's when you lip trill, you will know immediately when the breath pressure changes. So the goal is not to do a lip trill. The goal is to understand when the deviations of the trill happen and when the trill becomes inconsistent. So you see how the onset, it was louder? You don't want that. There is a range of motion that is or a range of differentiation between, like, you know, how much you're blowing and how little. That does matter. But the ultimate test for breath and its consistency, if you put your fingers in front of your mouth and you feel any air at all, that's too much. And the reason why I say that is because what's giving her power here is not her breath. That vowel modification is giving her power. And then she'll do something else. She'll tilt her thyroid cartilage, which will make the tone richer, add vibrato, and add power. Because the folds get stretched out, and it takes more air pressure builds up because they're stretched out like a rubber band. more air pressure builds up before they oscillate, before they open. So that makes it more power, sound pressure level, right? That's volume. This is where a lot of misunderstanding happens. People think, I really wish I could obliterate head, chest, voice, falsetto, and the words register. It's not very descriptive. Some people, it helps them. And, if it helps you, ignore what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what you call it as long as it's working for you. But when we describe it, it's really important that we understand it. So the reason why the tone changes from dark to bright here is because of the way belt works, and I'll explain that. The larynx goes up, soft palate is up, the tongue is wider, and her mouth is more open. All of those things give a brighter tone. But in particular, her cricoid tilt, the cricoid cartilage. So she's nowhere to hide, right? That vowel change, and then the thyroid cartilage is going to make that rich. Then the belt, she's going to raise her larynx, tilt the cricoid, and then it's going to get fat. And what that does is it's not a luscious note anymore. It's a very powerful note, very hot in a specific frequency range. And what it sounds like to people is a register change, but that's not what's happening. She's changing what she's doing with her larynx and vocal folds. And the breath is always spot on. You cannot belt in a healthy manner if you have too much air. And that is what Whitney Houston is so good at. We're not going to talk about it. The consistency of the breath. So she does that, which is the cricoid tilt to belt, and then she's so good at gently maneuver. This is not an on and off switch, right? These things have ranges of motion, and she's so good at just gently bringing it in and out. So here's the thyroid. The vibrato is how you know. Cricoid. As she goes down, she untilts the cricoid, starts tilting the thyroid. You can do both at the same time, but that's what she's doing here. This is tricky too. The amount of the thickness of the folds here. So the run is precise, but it's not like the first run that she did was super accurate and super gentle and super fast. The gravitas that she wants to bring here makes it so that the run is a bit more labored because the folds are thicker and they don't move as quickly. So these are trade-offs, right? She's making decisions here, right? If she wanted perfect, like a little bird, she would have really thin folds. That's not appropriate for where she is in the tune. So she's keeping the thickness just enough to give as much drama as possible, but to still be able to pull off the run.
Away from me.
This is the kind of stuff I sing to my wife.
You there. Away from me.
So the reason why me is kind of similar to the don't walk is actually, we'll talk about it, but check out her lips and how close she is to the microphone.
If you dare, must I imagine.
And that I is more that drooped palate at the particular part of the range.
You there.
Don't pursed close to the microphone. That would be, if she wouldn't close to the microphone, be don't. But listen to what happens when it gets close to the microphone. Don't. Proximity effect. Lower notes, more powerful.
Away from me.
The reason why me, even though it's brighter and even though she's kind of backed off the microphone a little bit, the reason why it's kind of seamless is because she wasn't tilting before. When you tilt, it adds power, like we talked about.
Away from me. Nothing.
Oh my God. Look at how she brings it, and then she makes it intimate.
If I don't
like, but still my heart. That's a hard decision to make as a singer. That's a very vulnerable decision. How much easier for her would it have been if she said, I have nothing if I don't have you? Because it's angry. And I don't think any one of us would have minded, because when big and epic needs to happen, Whitney's got it in spades, but that's not why she's a great singer. That'll make her a good singer, but that's not great. What's great is that she'll do this. Nothing. And then she'll give you this. And that's the difference. Right to the heart of me. Same idea here. Listen to the consonants. Right to the heart of me. When you have incredibly consistent and small amounts of breath pressure, when you have that, what you have is the ability to make your articulators work harder without compromising breath. So there's two ways to punch a consonant, if you will. More air, which if you can feel it. If you hold a T, if you hold your air to make a T sound, you'll feel the pressure build up. It's not pleasant. So you can do it. Or there's a way that you can make your articulators more dramatic. There's a bunch of different ways to hit that T. And there are some ways where you can have this consistent breath right to the heart of me. When she goes right to the heart, she'll go more gentle on heart, right to the heart. And that, it's almost silly how subtle that is, but it makes this phrase. Right to the heart of me. Listen, do you hear the T on heart? It's almost like it's not there. Right to the heart of me. It's like it wasn't there, right? That's the 200 IQ move right there. I walk with the strength of your love. I'm totally singing this for my wife. It's her birthday tomorrow. Don't tell her. She's just got such mastery of tone, and it's hard to describe because it's so smooth and seamless. So when I talk about like, oh, the palate's down here, and this is happening there, I can't really accurately communicate it unless I got like a scale. I'm like, well, now she's doing this, and it's at a 9, yeah, whereas before it was at a 7, right? Like, but even then, that doesn't really communicate it. But let's try to appreciate it for a moment. With the strength of your love. So there's the consonants. She's up close to the microphone. The lips are really relaxed, which is why it sounds really powerful here. The same thing with the lips and the mic proximity, but she's lightening the folds, which is she's thinning the folds and then throwing in some thyroid tilt, which is why you get this sort of fluttery effect. The other thing that she's really good at is understanding what she can and cannot do based on how much breath pressure she's using. If you're low, I think we already talked about this in this video, but if you're low and you want to go high, you can't put too much air behind the low. You have to start with the amount of air that it needs to hit the high note. So you can't have a lot of air. But she's not going high in this particular breath, so you can adjust it later. So in this, she's taking advantage of that. If she had to go much higher than that, probably like a fourth, maybe even a major third, it would have probably gone flat. But she knows that, and she doesn't have to go there, so that's why it's lighter. This is also very difficult. Belting, very little air, very precise amount of air. And on top of that, she's starting and stopping the notes. She's not singing it all the way through, she's starting and stopping. So there's levels of complexity to this. She has very little air, which allows for this sort of like super belt, I never knew. and then she's restarting the note and what's called a glottal stop. Glottal is, just think of it as like the space between the folds, right? So the folds come together and they stop vibrating. It's like, oh, and that's what this is. This. So love like those are glottals. And what's difficult is to make the air consistent as you do those glottals. I never knew love like I used. The reason why it's difficult, to keep the air even, you need to maintain a consistency of exhale. But when you stop and you keep your folds together and you're exhaling, pressure builds. So you have to back off a little bit on the glottals. The weight that she's giving here is, again, any more weight, particularly in this phrase, and she would not be able to go up very much. And what I love about Whitney is no one's a robot, no one's a machine. So when it's not going perfectly, she adjusts on the fly. And that to me is way more impressive than never making a mistake, because everyone makes mistakes. That immediate correction. She's a little off. And then she immediately will lighten. And that's how she gets right back on. It's almost imperceptible. Heifetz, one of the greatest violin players of all time, certainly in the recorded period that we have, he was asked, like, how come you're always on pitch? He's like, I'm not, I just slide. Right? Like the greatest violinist of all time. And that's what she's doing. And the other thing she does that's really smart is she'll get off things. That memory note there, she gets off of it. If she sustains that, it doesn't go well. And believe you me, I have been stubborn when I was singing something and I was like, this isn't going well. I'm going to continue doing it. And it's terrible. You realize you made a mistake. The audience really knows you made a mistake, and it's awkward for everybody. This is not the only situation where she'll do that. The last one we reviewed, she does it all over the place when she's doing vocally risque stuff. She's really, really, really smart about knowing what she can get away with. It's incredible. I also want to point out, I think, did we modulate yet? She's doing high differently than she did it here. Is this where it is? Yeah. Right? Versus, I'm imagining the zoom out. Oh. The soft palate isn't as down. There's less air. She introduces the vibrato earlier, and there's a reason for this. She was always so good at knowing where she was going. The B is hit a little hard, but otherwise everything has been lightened continuously on this gradual scale, and this is why she's so good. Gradually, gradually, gradually. She's not doing it right then and there because it's kind of abrupt and jarring. She's, over the course of many phrases, making adjustments so that when she has to sing like crazy stuff, she's ready. I tell you, man, there's not a lot of people who can just stand there and it's like, yes. Oh. Listen to the vowel modification on nothing. She goes darker progressively. It's that same thing. Hide, no, nowhere to hide. Right? She's doing the same thing on nothing here. Smart. The don't is punched. which is, again, fine. She's in a low. That's not a problem. It would be if she tried to continue singing with doing it. But this, again, this thing, this 200 IQ, mega IQ thing that she does, where she'll do something and stop. And it's like strength, right? Like, she'll say something, and that's it. And it's the stopping. What's it? The guy who plays Gus Fring in Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, in an interview, he said, this is a very powerful and dangerous man. And a powerful and dangerous man intimidates by leaving a lot of space. And if you go look at Gus Fring and the deliveries that he would do, it's true. And Whitney could do that and did it so well. Very quick adjustment. The me, again, the soft palate, and just expressiveness. She's so expressive. And then immediately adjusts to this higher part that she has to do. These higher parts take a tremendous amount of energy while also being relaxed. The way that I work with students, and the way I practice this actually, is like I'll do what's called an Alexander lie down, or I'll just do some stretching, and I'll calm down, and then I will give a lot of energy and try to go for the high note. If I'm stiff and I have a lot of energy and I go for the high note, it's just not going to work out. You need to have a super relaxed torso in order to not push excess air. So she is such an athlete vocally that she can just like manage her tension incredibly well. It's hard to see with the video quality, but in the previous video we covered, she was doing this, and then you can just watch visibly as her tension melts away. That's kind of what she's doing here. Flawless. I didn't curse. YouTube's not demonetizing me. Everything is immediately just brighter, more powerful. There's the soft palate is up. This woman knows how to sing and how to do everything. It's so important that you know that you have these options, because look at what she does with them. And listen how powerful that is. The mic is clipping. That, like, I don't know how to describe clipping. I can do it right here. You see how there's kind of like that unpleasant, like, that's called clipping. You better believe that anyone putting on this level of production is an incredible engineer in audio and knows how to avoid a clip. But they were not prepared for Whitney Houston's power. Actually, you can hear how they adjusted the volume right there. It is hard to communicate how much more powerful a belt is than ordinary speech level singing. When we record audio, we compress it, right? We compress the range, the dynamic range, because it would be impossible. You'd be like, what is this? And then she belts, and you're like, oh God. And yes, that is literally how you will react, right? Belting is so powerful. It's so loud. And it's hard to understand just from the recording how much power there is here. It's ludicrous. Someone, I was doing a cover of, Rehab. Make me go to rehab. And the way I was singing the noses, rehab, I said, no, no, no. And he was like, stop. What is that? And I'm like, the word no. And he's like, it's no, no, no. And I was like, oh. And again, like, I think we've talked about it a lot with when it comes to Whitney, but that's what she's really good at. And her stops don't feel like the phrase is ended, which is really important too. Oh, that's so good. The power of silence. There's a quote from Miles Davis. Silence is the most important part of music, something like that.
I don't hurt you.
So there's no tilt here. It's a neutral larynx. Super thin folds. And I can't tell. I think she's contracting her false folds. There's a deliberate adding of tension here. And it makes it sound so vulnerable.
You.